hang on a minute, I just need to have some sip of this delicious water.
What's the brand?
Coming up, the German Supreme Court set a new precedent in media transparency.
The International Olympic Committee changed Rule 40.
Hello and welcome to IDCOM's Media Snack, episode 36. Today we're going to be looking at a ruling that's come from the Supreme Court in Germany on media transparency and sets a new precedent.
That's right, and a week before the Olympics in Rio starts, we're going to look at a ruling that has just changed.
All coming up on today's Media Snack in just the time it takes to eat a sandwich. Okay, so first up today, news out of Germany. The Supreme Court in Germany has now made a definitive ruling on a case which has been rumbling on for about the last 6 or 7 years, involving Haribo, the sweet maker, and their media agency. Okay, in 2010, Haribo suspected that their agency, MediaPlus, at that point, were retaining rebates that maybe they thought that they were entitled to. And so they instructed court proceedings against them. This took years to resolve. And then finally, I think in 2013, the court ruled in favour of Haribo and said that they should have visibility of any kind of rebates or incentives paid to the media agency. 2 years further down the line, that was tested on appeal, and a higher court in Munich actually reversed the decision.
And the reason they reversed it was because Haribo's contract was with MediaPlus. And any suggestion that any of these rebates were being retained was being done at a group level. So where MediaPlus was in collaboration with a buying club, this is where the trading was being done. And because Haribo didn't have any contracts with the trading group and the holding group, they didn't have any ability to go and audit those books.
And that was the kind of reverse ruling. The higher court said, if you don't have a contract with the higher trading function, which in this case was a buying club, then you're out of luck, right? You don't have access, you don't have privilege to that. And you know, this reflects back to a lot of the advice that we talk about, you know, that you should aspire to contract with the group or the trading entity. And that's the way it was. It's gone back to court. It went back to court last year. And in June, the agency made a decision, which they've just only published in the last few weeks, the last few days.
So the Supreme Court has now found in favour of Haribo. And so they have reversed this decision, and it set a precedent in Germany, saying that because they had a contractual agent relationship with MediaPlus, that obliged MediaPlus to provide access to their books at a holding group level. Okay, so there's a clear distinction between the arrangement that obviously Haribo had with MediaPlus as an agent, as opposed to any principal arrangements that they had.
And that's the kind of critical decision of differentiation, which we think is really important. You know, we encourage the agency community, not just in Germany but around the world, to make it clear where they're acting as agent, where they're acting as principal, in case that's confusing. And this judgment rests very much on the definition. I think less about whether it states in the contract the role of the agent, but if the court can identify that's the relationship, that the agency is acting it as an agent and therefore should be wholly in the interests of the client, and therefore they should be obliged to pass back any incentive paid to that agency, whatever their structure. So whether it's at the holding group level, the buying group, trading entity, individual agency, and that's been the landmark, hasn't it? That's been the kind of the main point of difference.
And it's been a defining judgment, I think, in Germany. So number one, even if you don't have a contract in Germany with your holding group, as long as you have an agent agreement, you have access to their books. Number one. Number two, I'd imagine a lot of clients now will be looking to make sure that they have these arrangements, these agent agreements in place with their existing clients. And if they do, they, I would imagine, be starting to look to perhaps audit at a group level to see if they are, if they have been retained any rebates at that level.
Because this judgment will potentially opens up rights that they may not have had in the past. Now, this is isolated at the moment just to Germany. Outside of Germany, our advice is still that you should aspire to having a contract at the group level because it will tend to give you more of the access and those audit rights that you need in order to understand your relative position on rebates and incentives. But the German ruling kind of levels the playing field now a bit more for advertisers. So it's a big step forward and welcome.
And good on Haribo. I mean, this has been a process that's been going on for 6 years, and they've remained firm and been successful in the end.
Yeah. We will link to all the documents. If you speak German, you'll enjoy them a lot more than if you don't speak German, but enjoy.
So next up, the Olympics starts next week in Rio.
Very exciting.
Every 4 years, big, huge sporting event, probably the biggest event in the world, right?
Yeah.
And with all the excitement and the news behind, one or two kind of athlete issues that we have, we picked up on an interesting marketing story and implication. And it's all about this Rule 40.
Rule 40, yeah. So it's kind of yet another small controversy really surrounding the Olympics, but interesting from a marketing perspective. And Rule 40 is an element that's written into the contracts of athletes, trainers, Olympic officials, and such like. And what it does is it creates a blackout for a week or so before the Olympics. Yeah. So I guess we're in it right now. During the Olympics, and then for a few days afterwards. So any of those types of individuals are not allowed to make any reference to brands who are not official Olympic sponsors or country sponsors. That's right. And the idea being is that that's a way of controlling the sponsorship environment and making sure that those official Olympic sponsors have some exclusivity. Yeah. And that's been around for years, and that's why if you're a leading Olympic sponsor brand, you pay obviously the huge premium that you do.
And why have they decided to tweak Rule 40? Well, relax it now.
Because it's kind of not fit for purpose in an era when, particularly around the athletes. I mean, this is really focused on the athletes. Athletes themselves are walking media companies. Through social media, they have not all, but to different degrees, built their own audiences. So whether that's a Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat following, athletes want to engage with their community. And this is potentially the pinnacle of their career. This is the height of their attention that they may ever have. And Rule 40 forbids them from engaging with their followers and making any reference to any brands that they personally may work with.
Absolutely.
Which, as media properties themselves, is a bit of a problem. They can't kind of monetize their own fame.
Yeah. But it's a massive problem, I would imagine, for the brands, the really well-known brands that spend hundreds of millions of dollars in securing long-term sponsorship rights, not just with the tournament itself from an international perspective, but also from a team perspective. So there's the Team USA, there'll be the Team GB, and brands that associate with them for long periods of time have for decades had the value of that exposure protected because Adidas is a key sponsor of the Olympic Games. They knew that Nike wouldn't be able to invade that sponsorship exposure kind of period. Now it's kind of open season, right? Yeah. So brands will be far more active in terms of disruptive marketing behaviours, I'd imagine. Yeah. And well, who knows what's going to happen?
Well, yeah, and it unlocks. I think it's quite a good thing, as you say. If you're an official Olympic sponsor, you'd be feel a bit under threat, and you might be looking to renegotiate next time round to say that the value of that sponsorship has been diminished. And you've worked for both sides, haven't you? Because from Coca-Cola perspective, an official sponsor, and then Nike, who were not, but the public always thought that they were because they activated so well.
And that was always the decision. Do you invest half of your marketing spends in sponsoring big tournaments and then have a limited fund then to activate around it, or do you try and ring fence and protect all of that investment and perhaps be slightly more aggressive and invest heavier around that sort of area? So that whole disruptive ambush marketing, I think, is something that Nike were particularly good at around the World Cups and the Olympic Games.
And they've kind of set the benchmark for that, and which I think a lot of brands will now copy, because the reality is it's the athletes as brands. These are not just individuals and athletes. They are media, they are media channels in themselves. They have audiences. They are far more attractive potentially now as areas for sponsorship and association than the headline sponsorship of the Olympics.
Yes.
But not least because they are more flexible. They give you more options. And we saw it in 2012, 4 years ago. You remember that the Beats headphones did some fantastic kind of guerrilla marketing to get their product on athletes, not official, but got a huge broadcast. It's going to make this ambush and guerrilla marketing, this activation, really, really interesting.
But it will also force the existing sponsors to relook at the way that they engage with the IOC, the way that they activate this massive asset, which is sponsorship of the biggest sporting event in the year. Because if their competitors are able to kind of permeate the walls of the commercial territories within these big events, then it's going to be a major problem. So it's yet another example of the IOC having to figure out how to avoid competitive advantage, I guess, whether that's on the track or on the billboard. But we'll look forward to seeing that over the next few weeks. Okay, thank you for watching. That's all for this week. Please subscribe to the channel to be updated with new content. Bye for now. Have a good weekend.